So, hello and welcome to this edition of the TAL and HE Researchers series. I'm going to be doing the talking today because Puyin's got a bit of a cold. I'll introduce myself and then Puyin will introduce herself and then we can introduce our speaker for today. So my name's John Brindle. I am a PhD student in e-research and TEL at Lancaster University. I'm currently at thesis stage, although I'm taking a little break from writing at the moment. But I'm also learning design manager at Edgehill University in the northwest of England. And I'm going to now introduce you to Puyin. So Puyin, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Everyone, I'm Puyin. I'm John's best friend and the only friend he has. I'm joking. So I'm Puyin. I'm also on the same stage as John with our thesis writing, except I've decided to soldier on because there's been a bit of delay last year, so it's time to catch up. But it's always good to once a month to see lovely people through the TEL Researchers and HE Researchers session. So good to see you all here, and welcome back to another year. This is our fourth year running the series. So yeah, thank you very much for your support.
This session. So it's my absolute privilege to welcome Virna Rossi to the TEL and HE Researchers series. As someone who's admired her work ever since I saw her present at her Roots and Shoots approach at keynote at the University of Liverpool's Learning and Teaching Conference. Virna's work's had a big impact on my own practice, and I'm really looking forward to hearing you speak for us today. So Virna is Associate Professor and Course Leader of the PG Cert at Ravensbourne University, London. A passionate teacher since 1999, she's worked in all education sectors and has been a teacher educator since 2009. Her research focuses around the challenges of implementing more inclusive learning design, the use of threshold concepts in learning design with a particular focus on assessment design. And she's also the author of an innovative book, Inclusive Learning Design in Higher Education, and its companion website, which we will share a link to in the chat for you very shortly. So without any hesitation, Virna, I would really like to everyone to extend a really warm welcome to you.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. This is a great event, I think, because it's something about, it's a bit different than, other events, webinars, where it's about what you know, but this is about how you got there and the journey. And I think it's just so fascinating to hear people's stories and how they got to where they are and how they got to do what they're doing. So I don't know whether you will find my story inspiring. It's not by any means straightforward, A levels, etc. It's very different. So anyway, I will tell you a bit about it. So I've got some slides, and I thought, well, how should I? What should I call this? And then I thought, well, I think I have to call it the Roots to Shoots. That's what it is. So my journey is a bit like a tree, yes. So I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about the roots, and a little bit about the shoots, and a little about the fruits. And the fruits came a little bit later than sort of expected. So what do I mean by the roots? Right, let me see if I can actually forward the slides. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, I talk a little bit about the values that have always driven me, the potential barriers that not only could have stopped me in the past, but in a way still there. The connections that I made and how meaningful they've been. Some of them are here. The persistent work that I did for many years without particularly seeing results, but then, yeah, the fruits, when they arrive, what they were like. So I want to tell you a little bit about my values because sometimes it's sort of a bit of a mix, personal and professional, etc. So my sort of ecosystem is rooted, I think, in some core values that are to do with my upbringing, my culture, my family, and my personality in a way. So something, for example, that is very important to me, has always been very important, is hospitality. You might find this a bit weird, like what that's got to do with anything? Because where I come from in Italy, I don't come from a big, busy city or a tourist spot or these big art cities like Florence. I wish, but no, I come from the middle of nowhere, a place that you would have never heard of. Absolutely beautiful, stunning scenery with the mountains, etc. But one thing which is very important in the area where I come from is hospitality. Actually, if somebody comes to your house, it's quite something, you will go the extra mile and make them feel comfortable, etc. So for me, that's something that has always been part of who I am. And then it has extended to my practice, definitely. The importance of creating welcoming spaces, of mattering, that people matter, that our students matter, for example. So that's, I think, been part of it. Then in terms of family, just put, I know it sounds a bit stereotypical, but I had a very stable upbringing with, mom, dad, and one sister, only 1 year difference from me. So we're very close family, and even with the extended family. So that's always, I think, giving me good foundation. And I think that's important because, again, something that I've always thought it really is important, because some people perhaps haven't had a family as such, or maybe they've had broken families or trauma to do with family. So sometimes it's difficult for them to talk maybe about family even. So in my case, I've had this luck, inverted commas, and so it's also always translated into me wanting to build supportive relationships with others. For me, like when I have a cohort, I view it as a family. I have that sense of care for them. But I also wanted to mention actually faith, because for me, I've always been, not always, but I am a practicing Christian, and I think my faith has always actually supported me in many ways when things are not easy, and also just those very basic sort of values to do with caring for others, and even in terms of leadership, for example, it's a servant leadership. It's not about the big boss and sitting down, but it's about actually doing more for others. So those are just some of the things I wanted to mention from my background that I think actually do come through my practice, because they make who I am. And they also provide a certain stability and let's call it that nourishment to grow. Hope that makes sense, yeah, to you. So the thing is, I haven't always had it easy, because what I said before, in terms of where I come from, I am 100% first generation student from rural Italy. In fact, not just first generation in my family, but first generation in my extended family. I was literally the very first one to go to university. And now, of course, it's completely flipped, and literally none. So say my sort of age cousins, etc., they've all got children, etc. And so their children are all at university. So of course it's completely flipped, but I was one of the first ones. So that means I never had somebody to talk to about my experiences or trying to understand the system or to help me. So I had to work it out by myself. The other thing is that I'm going to tell you a little anecdote about something that happened that sometimes I think, wow, I don't know how my parents trusted me so much. So I had moved to Verona in the north of Italy to study. I decided to study humanities. Of course, this is a choice just driven by passion. I was interested in natural medicine or humanities, and the natural medicine faculty was in a complicated, logistically wouldn't work. So I chose humanities instead. And of course, there are things that are much more, they've got more prestige, but that's what I was interested in. I wanted to study language and literature. And so I chose that. So I moved there, and then in Verona, in the north of Italy, and then I came to London, where I am now, on holiday. And literally, we were walking down the road in Holloway Road, and then there was this massive grey building. And I was with my friend, and I said, I wonder what that is. It looks like a prison. I honestly said those words. And then as we approached, we saw it said it was a university, North London University, now called London Met. And I just said, why don't we go in? Let's have a look. So we walked in. And then, honestly, I don't even know how it occurred to me. I just asked the question at reception. I said, oh, could you tell me, how does the system work here? I've done 3 years of university in Italy. What would happen if I moved here? And then would you accept me? And then they called this professor who came. That's one conversation that can completely change your life. This professor, he just told me, yeah, no problem. You could come, and you could, of course, pre-Brexit, yeah, and you could join the last year, etc. That's what happened. And so that's what I did. I just moved to London 28 years ago, and I finished my degree at London Met. And so the second point, the cultural transition, I think I had grossly underestimated the cultural shock educationally of moving from one system to the next. And just to give you an idea, the last exam I did, and because they're called all exams in Italy, the last exam that I did in Italy for my degree consisted in a viva where I had to prepare 50 literature books, either novels or critiques of novels, etc. And then it's a viva where you don't know what question you're going to be asked. You have to be able to discuss. Then I come here, everything is essay based, everything. It's like, wow. So it took me a whole year to understand that. So that's, I think, gives you a lot of empathy when you've gone through that, because you realize it is really not easy for students who come from another system. It literally takes about a year to understand, to find your footing there. The other thing is, fast forward now over 20 years, because otherwise I'll be here literally till tomorrow. The fact that having had two boys, so two children, I made a choice that I wanted to work part-time because I wanted to be an involved mum. And I just wanted to also do other things. I didn't want to be Monday to Friday, etc. So of course that means less money. Absolutely. But I also realized that to navigate growth on a 3-day a week, which started with 2 days a week, while raising a family, it wasn't going to be easy. We had zero help from any family because we don't have family in the UK, neither me or my husband. So basically it was all on us. And so those were the things that really could have meant that I couldn't really accomplish much, to be honest. So the routes helped, but the terrain was challenging. So I found this word, which I found yesterday. I'm going to be honest, I didn't really know this word, but I thought it was a great word. Mycorrhizal networks. What a great word. And what does that mean? It means all what happens around the roots. So you've got those roots, and then you've got fungi, you've got microlife and bacteria, and the roots sort of find each other and become interwoven. And so all of that is because I want to talk about networks, and sometimes they're a bit hidden, and the power of connections. I'm sure you've heard this with many of your hosts, but for me, that was absolutely fundamental. And the main reason is because I work in a small institution. I've been here 9 years. I've become vintage because everyone else is pretty much newer than me. And I just realized early on that I'm professionally isolated here. There's hardly anybody doing my work internally. Initially, there was nobody. It was literally just me. I was doing educational development, whatever that meant, PG cert, senior fellowship, etc. So I thought, well, I need a network. I need to find my tribe. And so somebody recommended CEDA, and it was amazing. As soon as I realized what that meant, I was like, wow. For me, it became my professional home, mutual support. And since 2017, I've been very active, and I feel I've received so much. I also feel I've given, but I think I've definitely received more. The other one is Twitter. And that happened when around just before the pandemic, the beginning of 2020, I was talking to a friend. I was saying, I love being with CEDA, the network, but I said, I still feel quite isolated. I just don't have anyone else to talk to. And she said, oh, have you tried Twitter? And I was very skeptical. Anyway, I tried it, but then the pandemic started literally a few weeks later, and it became this avalanche of professional solidarity. I couldn't believe this place where so many ideas were being shared and the support systems created. And that's how I found nearly everybody else that I'm still in touch with, I'm still working with. It was through Twitter. And I did put until 2023, because unfortunately, for me, that was literally the death of Twitter. And I am now on Blue Sky, by the way. But it takes a while to rebuild that. So anyway, for me, this was absolutely fundamental. And it led to the third point there, to the international collaborations, where I really co-created this growth with others. I found myself in contact with so many people I could have never dreamt of from all over the continents and all types of colleagues. It was fantastic, honestly. And so, yes, the last point for me that's so important. Networks are the life force of a thriving professional ecosystem. For me, I would recommend to anybody, in case you feel a little bit stuck, join a network, find a network, find your tribe, because that is just so powerful. So then there was quite a long phase, for me it was long, where the canopy, you know, like the branches and leaves were growing. I felt I was doing so much, but I was doing so much because I was interested, sincerely. I am driven by passion. I was just felt interested. I did a lot of mentoring in many different ways. I did mentoring within the PG cert that I lead. But then I also did mentoring of new staff. I did mentoring of colleagues who were applying for senior fellowship. I also did mentoring of the mentors. And that was very interesting. I found that very, very interesting. And even mentored external colleagues. So I did quite a lot of mentoring, and I actually really enjoy that. I think I actually thrive in assisting others in whatever they are doing. The other thing is that I got involved with a lot of SOTL. I am not in a research-intensive university at all, unfortunately. It's very much teaching-based. And so that's not ideal if you want to develop research. But I found my way, let's say. So with SOTL, for example, I always try to document, to do my own action research and look at impacts, just to develop my practice. I was interested. And then the other thing is, through this PGCERT leadership, I also realized I needed to find a little bit more, again, my tribe in that sense. So I started this initiative at the end of 2020, where I started a series of Padlet Forum, where I invite colleagues who want to talk about different aspects of the PGCERT type provision. And so we share ideas, and then it's been amazing what has come out of that again. So yes, that canopy sort of was growing, but I still didn't feel like there was any, in a way, return. Like, I don't know, I was a bit stuck. I felt, well, I'm on 3 days a week, you know, I've got little kids. Well, this is it. I'm just working hard and nothing's going to really come of it. That's how I felt at the time. But going to the next phase, which was the pandemic. So I broke into parts, because then the pandemic actually changed everything in my case. First of all, I think, you know, how sometimes something happens and you feel almost like, okay, this is my time that I can really do something. And I felt I needed to do something for my colleagues in terms of internally, in terms of this switch to online. It was so traumatic for a lot of colleagues, because this is a very making university, very hands-on. There is architecture, there is textile, etc. So it was very difficult for them to envisage how to do this online. So I needed to really, in my role, I just need to really support my colleagues for the online switch. But then I also thought, well, as I'm doing this, I may as well just share it with the wider network. So I shared it on CEDA, and I did this series of short videos, about 5 minutes each, about very specific sort of aspects of this online switch. For example, how to support students emotionally, how to use group work online, etc. And so this video series was like, it just became, at the time, it was so well received. It actually was translated in Arabic and in Swedish. I was like, wow. So that's when the first time that I felt that there was this reach really beyond where I am working. Yeah. And so the external audiences, yeah. Again, this meant then there were new collaborative doors that opened. And then because of that, I started getting involved, I think, more and more in public speaking. I was asked to do a few keynotes actually in 2020, then 21 as well, and just generally conferences, events, etc. And so that all happened also while I was writing my book. So in 2020, just before the pandemic, I started thinking I would really like to write a book about learning design. And then I had a mentor myself, yeah. And then I was, of course, very unrealistic about how long it would take. I thought it would probably take 6 months to a year. And sure enough, it took 3 years. Because I involved so many people, and then it became this huge project. And yes, and then of course the pandemic and moving because we were displaced, etc. So again, the canopy was growing, but the fruit remained elusive. I'm sorry, I have to move because the lights have gone off. That's it. Okay, so then finally, the bloom. When did the bloom happen? The ecosystem flourished almost in an explosive manner between 2023 and 2024. It's as if everything came to fruition at once. I honestly, a lot of these things I did not seek, they just happened to me. For example, there wasn't really a route for my role, etc. Then they created a route, sort of progression route professionally. So I applied for associate professorship. I didn't think I would get it, but in fact I got it. Like, wow. And then the book came out in 2023. That year I got National Teaching Fellowship, which I sincerely was astonished that I got it at the first go. I sort of thought I had a good story, but I didn't think I would get it because it's not easy to get it. I also got the Award Reviewer of the Year for the Journal of Learning and Development in HE, which awesome crowd. Then I was put on the CEDA Roll of Honor, which I promise I didn't even know it existed. So I was so honored, really I was. And when I saw the others that were there, I'm like, wow, just being listed together with those people is like amazing. Then that just keeps going, basically. That last year, Educator of the Year internally, that was really precious to me because I felt very invisible before the pandemic. Not that I wanted to be on a stage, but in terms of just visibility of your work and recognition internally before the pandemic, I honestly felt that most people didn't even know what I was doing. But then because of the pandemic, everything changed. And so I thought that was just a recognition of the visibility of Sotol internally. So that's what I was happy. And then, I got Principal Fellowship as well, same year, last year. And then I also started writing my second book about designing impact for PG certs, linked to that series of Padlet forums, because I thought, well, there's just so much here. I feel it's the raw data for a book. And so again, I put myself into this big thing, and the manuscript is actually nearly finished. Hopefully will be done by the end of this month. So finally, the fruit came in the form of, different recognitions. As I said, some of them I had not sought, some of them I sought. So let me just go to the last, that's right. So the thing that I would like to highlight here is the fact that this cycle, because of that networking that I started and it still keeps going, it's like the cycle continues. So when you think about the fruit, fruit actually holds a seed to produce more fruit. And so it's like it extends, the ecosystem extends. So through practice, mentoring, publishing, I've been involved in much more Sotol in different ways and more colleagues, lots of different collaborations, international partnerships, and lots of things happening even with other countries that would have been amazing. And actually, I've seen new ecosystems happen. Colleagues and students, they develop their own growth cycles, which I think has really been the most rewarding thing, to see that actually what you do very genuinely supports others. So just before I go to the last slide, so I wanted to say, so in all of this, it's interesting how there are a few PhD students here, and I really admire what you're doing. So in my case, I should have really put another slide there. In my case, after doing an MA in fact, it was in teaching at the Institute of Education, and I got involved in teaching that, which I loved. Although I had the possibility of joining a PhD, I didn't have the circumstances. I just couldn't do it. I could not afford so many years to study, and because then the family, children, etc. And so it became very complicated. But then I had a few conversations, and they had me realize, well, you can do it the other way around. You can either sort of do the normal route, let's say, or you can do it by publication. So instead of doing it that way, if you focus on doing research, publishing, either books, research, etc., then that will create the narrative, which eventually you can join in a PhD by publication. So that's how I'm doing it. And I'm hoping actually to get that done next year. So in a way, with that, I probably would have achieved all the things I really wanted to. And I've just enjoyed the ride, to be honest, although it's been ups and downs because of circumstances, like everyone. But I've decided to stay in the same institution because I've really enjoyed my role. So yeah, we're not a Russell group. We will never be, probably. I'm pretty sure we'll never be. But for me, I've just enjoyed my role very much. I've enjoyed what I've done. I've found it extremely rewarding and just inspirational, really. And so this is why I've decided, well, sometimes I hear colleagues, they're elsewhere and in institutions that I really admire. But when I hear them, they are complaining about, not necessarily about the cuts, which of course are also happening, but just it's not all green, yeah, on the other side. And so I think to myself, well, I think probably I'm happy where I am. At the moment, who knows in the future. So the last thing I want to talk about is that one of the aspects in all of this that I've talked about that has sort of provided the most personal reward, I would say, not not a trophy, but a personal reward, is seeing and being in touch with colleagues from very different realities, and just having that exchange where I've benefited from their work because maybe they contributed, for example, to my book, but then I also wanted to pay back. And so I involved them in public speaking, in networks, in different experiences. So the two examples I wanted to mention is one, we have Tula with us, who I hope she'll be able to talk in a few minutes. I just want to summarize the Nelly because she's not able to join us live today. So with Nelly, I wanted to just tell you so that you understand what I'm talking about. To be honest, I cannot remember exactly how I got in touch with Nelly, but I think it's somebody who I was in touch with on Twitter put me in touch with her. And then I heard that she was doing some very interesting work. She's an associate professor at the American University in Cairo. And she was doing some very interesting work in business. So she teaches business students, both undergraduate and postgraduate. And she had changed their assessment into podcasting. So the students submit a podcast, a business podcast. So they have to actually interview a real industry people, etc. And that's the submission. And I just thought that was so interesting. I mean, now it may have become slightly less unusual in the last few years, but if you think about the fact that I heard this for the first time about 4 years ago, well, it was quite an innovation 4 years ago. And so I invited her to write a case study for my book, which she did. And it's actually one of the gems, I think. And then I invited her also to, as a payback, you know, as a guest speaker on my PG cert. And then we did a few events together. And I know that she has been able to use this work as part of her own CPD and progression, sort of in terms of her professional, progression. So that makes me very happy. There is a genuine exchange. Is not just me finding the people and getting something from them. So I hope it's something that I'm also giving to them. So for the second example, which is Tula, I don't know, Tula, if you're able to come to the microphone to come live. And yes, I'm going to stop sharing, actually. Oh, good. So yeah, just basically, I just asked you to join if you could, to say a few words about what you've gained from our networking, our professional friendship, anything you want to say.
Yeah, thanks, Virna. Because of connectivity issues, I might not be able to turn on my camera, but hopefully I'm audible enough. Okay. Yes, I have been part of this evolving community of practice around the inclusive by design work that Virna has put together. And the one takeaway that I treasure from this collaboration is to be challenged that your design depends on the roots, just like Virna has outlined. And as a novice researcher, a PhD student myself, who practices as a learning designer, This has been very inspiring work, and I've really grown, not only as a learning designer, but also as a novice researcher, because for the first time, you get an opportunity to combine the two, your research and your practice. And I contributed also a mini chapter in that book project. And my work looked at a case in practice regarding the use of culturally respectful pre-cause needs analysis, which is part of the work that Virna has put together. So yes, and thanks to you again that I'm also part of the contributors in the second project on the PG set. So not only am I also learning from other experiences, but also as we are just beginning now to mount such a program, so we are learning from more able others, those who've already done the work in this field. Thank you so much.
Oh, that's amazing. I didn't even know that actually. But so you're creating like a staff development taught route, like similar to the PG set. So by the way, Tula, thank you so much. Tula is actually joining from Eswatini. I'm always a little bit, because I think you work for, is your work with the University of Eswatini or the University of South Africa?
I was based at UCT with a project on universal design for learning, and so as a student, but I worked part-time with them. Now I'm back full-time in the University of Eswatini. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's good. Oh, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate that. And this is the thing that has been very interesting, is the fact that sometimes from a little tweet, a professional exchange of 4 years has is still going, and has really happened because of that. So sometimes I think I noticed, this is talking about roots, etc., and the culture. I think sometimes in the UK, because people are very polite, I must say, generally, and so there is this thing of being how do you say, of being officially introduced. That's it. I was looking for the word, of being officially introduced to somebody, and then you can yes. So and then you can get going with an exchange. But the thing is, for me, for example, in my context, I realized if I wait to be officially introduced to all the people I need to connect with, well, it's just never going to happen, because I've got to start from somewhere. And so I officially introduced myself to people. And so through Twitter, and especially at the time, and also SIDA, I just reached out. I would just say to people, oh, I noticed you're working in this area, what about this, what about that? And would you be interested in collaborating? And just not being shy, that's what I mean, not being shy, which perhaps I shocked a number of people on the way, but never mind. So yeah, that's it. That's really my story in a nutshell. I have been in the UK for 28 years, and I've lived very happily actually here. And I've just felt that a lot of the things that have happened to me really often have happened through one single conversation, either in person or via social media, but literally sometimes one little thing and just everything changed. And so, yeah, I think sometimes the problem is just staying so much in our silos, because we are busy, first of all, and also because, as I said, sometimes culturally or being officially introduced, and also because maybe fearing that, oh, what they're going to think of me, that I'm just, but sometimes if you just let go and just take that first step, you might be surprised. Most people love talking about what they're doing anyway. So you can just ask them about their work. There's only just one thing I wanted to say. Actually, I should have really put that as a last slide. Is I think sometimes, especially for anybody who works part-time. So you see, first generation, working part-time, being a carer. To be honest, particularly being a mum, it just tends to be the workload, tends to be on mums, or working in small institutions, all those things. Yeah, honestly, there can be barriers, but they don't have to. You can find a way of navigating that while developing your practice and networks, and eventually, even though there's a phase, eventually. So I hope my story is a bit of a message of hope for those who feel, I can never do that but I think eventually you can do it.
So I want to ask you about, I'm really interested in inclusive practice. It's what I'm researching. So what drove you to explore inclusive design? What led you into that way of thinking?
That's very interesting. Actually, it's such a good question. So actually what happened is, I'll tell you exactly what happened with the first book, is that I wanted to write something about curriculum design, course design, something on those lines. I wasn't set on a particular thing, but I knew it was about that, because as a PhD lead, it's one of the modules we teach is called curriculum design. And I just always felt I didn't have a guide, or practical guide that I would have used with my students. I was using bits from all sorts of places, and I thought, I wish there was a guide. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll just write a guide. And because I was professionally isolated, and there was absolutely no one internally that could have actually asked about this particular area. So I thought, who can I ask? And then I thought about CEDA. And then I thought, I'm going to ask David Bohm if he doesn't mind. So I just emailed him and I said, look, I'm sorry for the mail out of the blue. I've got an idea for a book, but I just would like to have a conversation with somebody who's been there, because obviously you've written so many books. And I couldn't believe, he said, yeah, come around. And he invited me to go to his house. I didn't, well, I know he's obviously passed away now, but I only lived about 40 minutes from his house. So I actually went to his house. I could not believe it. That was like so touching. I thought to myself, what an example of somebody willing to support somebody else who's, the start of this type of journey. Anyway, so that's when we started talking about this idea of a book. And then he said, well, I think you need to really define your audience. You need to really know who is it exactly this for, who are you aiming, and you need to have a theme. It can't just be generic. So when he said that, I thought, well, if there has to be a particular theme, then I would definitely want it to be inclusivity, because I just think good design must be inclusive in a broader sense. And so then I thought, well, if I call it good design, perhaps doesn't resonate as much. I didn't actually know at the time that this was going to become quite big on the agenda of all institutions. I actually didn't do it because of that. I just was looking for a way of presenting all of that evidence and the ideas and the case studies I was going to gather under one particular theme. And so it just felt like it's something I'd been thinking about, and then it just became the most logical, let's say, overall theme. But yes, I must say that conversation was really, so if in case any of you want to write a book, I think you should talk to somebody, not to me, to somebody who's been there, because it can really give you a completely different perspective on the project you got in mind. Very, very useful conversation.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much for answering that question, Virna. Does anybody else have a question that they'd like to ask?
Hi, Virna. Long time no speak. How are you?
I know. Hello. Good to see you. Yeah. All good.
So I think the question I always ask people that have kind of travelled a path that maybe others haven't is what advice you would give yourself coming into the beginning, because I think there's so much we can learn and pass on to others so they don't have to have perhaps the same challenges that you might have faced. So maybe 2 or 3 bits of advice that you would have given yourself that you now know that you would tell yourself at the beginning of the journey.
Yeah, actually, that is a very good question. I think one thing I should have done, and I didn't do until very late, was to find critical friends that could act as either mentors or not, but at least peers. Because I was a bit professionally isolated even before here in what I was doing. Sometimes if you're in a small institution, it is just you doing the teaching and learning stuff. So that I think would make a big difference. So I would say for somebody, starting just try to find at least either a network or a critical friend as soon as possible. I think that really makes a massive difference. In terms of books, I would say there are different ways to go about it, but perhaps the best advice is a bit what I received. If you know you've got a good story, because sometimes I've got a good story about this, which could be, let's say, for a national teaching fellow, but why not make something always count for two things? Because really professional practice is very busy. We are all stretched very thin. And sometimes you think, well, I've got, there are some things you have to do and you're putting in place, and can that count for something else? Could you turn that into maybe a professional blog post, or put it on the National Teaching Repository, or present it at a conference, or just instead of doing one thing for one purpose and it dies there, make that work that you've put into it stretch and go further by using it for other outputs? Because I've seen that chain happen. It wasn't totally intentional, but now that looking back, I see the chain. I'm like, well, actually, that should have been intentional, where things really helped. One thing helped the next, helped the next, helped the next, and then it just became a bit of a snowball effect. From one smaller initiative became much bigger. Yeah. So I would say something like that would be I'm very pragmatic. So make it count for two if you can. I would say save yourself time as well.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Virna. And I think that's really interesting as well, because I think, a lot of we have that traditional views of research, which is kind of, around publishing in, so many star journals, all that kind of thing. But I think sometimes those less traditional routes, like blogs, like tweets, like things like that, can sometimes be a bit more impactful, can't they? Is that what you? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, actually, no, talking about that precisely. It's interesting because that is why I thought with National Teaching Fellowship, what chances do I have? Because I haven't, produced this amazing research that I see people do. The problem is when you are in an institution where that is not, unfortunately, is not a priority, unless you literally do it completely by yourself, it can be very difficult, and to get that support and funding, even recognition of the time you put into it. And so in my case, the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning and the grey literature is much easier to produce, because actually I'm much more likely to get support for that internally, which is changing definitely, but it's just taking a while. In fact, now I'm actually writing an article for a journal with colleagues. But just to say, yes, sometimes I think people underestimate the impact that all of that can have. I'll tell you one little thing on, I don't know whether any of you are on that LTHE chat, the chat which used to be on Twitter, now it's on Blue Sky. That chat, I just can't tell you how much that impacted my growth, because also I led a couple of chats during COVID. In fact, one of them was with Tula specifically, and there was some I'm trying to remember his name. I think the surname is Scott. I don't know his first name. He loves doing these graphs. Where I should really remember his name. Basically, it shows you those connections, like from the question from LTHE chat. It's a graphic representation of the network. It's a visual of how the network changes. And for 2 years, for that network, my tweets, according to his graphs, I was the top influencer. Which is quite funny. And that's Scott Turner, exactly. Precisely. Thank you so much. Yes. So I was the top influencer, but I didn't know that. I only found out because when I was doing my National Teaching Fellowship, I just reached out to him and I said, look, because I need to provide sort of impact evaluation, etc. I was thinking about my activity. Perhaps you have a summary or something. And then he sent that to me and I thought, oh, I can't believe that. So yes, things like that you can just take it for granted, or I think, what people should do. I've done that now recently. This is another tip, going back to Simon's thing, that everybody should have that. I've created a Padlet called My Subtle Project. And then anything which I eventually could feed into. I just put it there. It doesn't have a particular structure, but if I get feedback, if I get something that I know, okay, for example, this one from Scott, from Scott, then I actually put it there as well. So just to have a collection of these different smaller activities that you do, because they can build, basically then you have a bigger picture, a narrative, and you can use it as qualitative data for what you're discussing. Definitely.
I like Sue's comment that she has a happy file. That's good. I like that. That's a great idea.
I like this thing, because you've got this cultural thing. See, you've got two proper gentlemen here who have been dragged in all this.
I only drag in the most polite British gentleman, because, you know, if you don't, then they're gonna sit there and go like, oh, I shall wait for the email from this not so gentle Chinese, Italian, and everyone else from the rest of the world. So I thought, which cut the crap and go straight to the end point, you know.
Well, I'm going to go and make a cup of tea in a minute and have some biscuits. Yeah.
I love that. Oh, this is interesting, Joe. Joe, you say, Stuart, there's somebody who does that for conferences and events. Oh my goodness, what an idea! What about doing that in the UK? There you go, research project for one of you. Setting up a way of capturing impact through conferences and events. That's great. I love that. So I wonder that. So Joe, this person who does it. So do you mean about conference presentations or outputs from conference? The whole thing.
It's around the I guess, well, it was the live tweeting. I don't know what platform he would move to to now, but looks at how the conversation spreads and the networks that are formed throughout those. So it's always, and then he always posts his maps a few days after the conference, and everyone madly looks for their name and sees whether they've made it onto the map.
That is amazing. I love that. That is so interesting, because at conferences you've got this other layer, isn't it? This back channel. You've got what's happening there, and then you've got all the social media conversations, and it really is so interesting what happens in the way people connect. You know, there was a research years ago about the weak links. I think it was the wing, or was it the weak ties? And it was about this, the fact that you've got, so for example, in your case, you've got John and Puing and Simon. Perhaps in this case, you would be the strong links. Then you would have those secondary ones, like the second level. And we don't think about those all the time, but eventually over a certain amount of time or for particular projects, they can become primary links. And so the idea is that you don't just dismiss, you know, like people who are a bit marginal, let's say, to a practice, but you nurture, that's it, you nurture those communities. And but not for selfish, you know, because sometimes I wonder if people think, like, I never reach out to somebody thinking, oh, I can exploit this. I always thought, wow, they're doing great work. I wonder how that could feed into what I'm doing, which would give them exposure and enrich what I'm saying, and hopefully become something mutual. And most of the time, that's exactly how it's worked out. It's been this two-way.
Right. Well, I think it's time to say thank you so much for your time, Virna, and thank you for everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
It's been an absolutely brilliant session, and you get our customary round of applause.
Thank you.
Quite round of applause for sharing your journey with us. Thank you so much. It's been a privilege listening to you.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon, everyone.